Ryan Schultz here from E39 Source, and welcome back. I'm going to go ahead and tell you at the top of this video, it's still summer. Go pour yourself a mojito, get somewhere comfortable, because we're about to talk for probably over an hour about this car that I have now owned for 10 years. I cannot believe it. It's been 10 years and about 10 days and over 66,000 miles. I'm about to get way too carried away explaining everything, how everything came to be, how the business started, how and why I got this car, and then what my goals with it have been and where I plan to take it in the future. So get set up, get comfortable, let's kick it off. The story starts July 18th, 2009. My best friend and I, Kenan, you guys know him, he's out in California now, he's got the 2002 titanium silver E39 M5. We were riding our bikes. This is before we had driver's licenses, before we could drive, of course, before anything. We were in high school. We just rode our bikes around about 2,000 miles a year in the small Midwestern town of Hudson, Ohio. And we knew cars, we liked cars, we watched Top Gear, we knew what a BMW M5 was. The E60 was still in production, pretty new. We saw a couple of those around town. I always freaked out about the V10 sedan. But we found this car, just street parked downtown Hudson, and we took a picture of it. Here's that photo. That was July 18th, 2009. I had no idea that this car would allow me to form the friendships and business relationships and business and just everything that it has afforded me to be able to do over the past decade. Ironically, exactly a year later, after we saw the car downtown and just took a picture of it, July 18th, 2010, we found the car downtown again for sale. Had a for sale sign on it. Now, I knew I wanted a BMW. I thought it was wishful thinking to want a BMW as your first car. I wanted an E36 3 Series, not an M3, and that's not mine. But I thought, you know, a 328 with a 5-speed that'll get you into cars, that'll let you drive a manual. I thought that'd be super fun. I set a lofty goal that I was going to mow enough lawns as a kid and paint enough grandparents' basements to be able to get an E36. And I looked at one. It sold out before I was really ready to buy it, or of course had the money to buy it, but that's for the better, because we saw this. There was a phone number on it. I called the previous owner, the second owner of this car, and I spoke with him. I found out it had 143,000 miles on it at the time, and my heart sank when I heard that. I thought that would be way too much to try to convince my parents that it would make sense to buy a car with 143,000 miles on it. We had only owned pretty much Hondas, or at least my mom had just Hondas up until that point. We always sold them before 60,000 miles or so and just got something newer, so 143 sounded quite high to me. Nonetheless, my dad and grandfather and I decided to go to Dave's home and check out the car, drive the car a little bit, and I'll never forget my first ride in that passenger seat there. It was just the tightest, most solid, heavy engineered. I could tell that this thing was just a spaceship in terms of the technology when it came out and the way it rode and sounded and drove and the interior configuration. It was tighter than I expected inside. At the time we had an '07 Accord EX V6, so maybe that just had a little bit more interior room, but I loved everything about this car. My dad loved the car too. He's been a car guy for years. He had a Porsche 924 as his first sports car, and then he actually bought a 2003 530i 5-speed sport package, steel blue, black leather interior, style 42s, every option but PDC. It had Xenons and Sport Pack, Tech Pack, navigation, all that fun stuff. And I remember loving that car. But my dad loved the way this drove, and we came up with a deal, $12,500 for the car, 143,000 miles. It was 10 years old in 2010, and I could not believe, seeing the handshake go down, that this would be mine. A couple days later, we met early. Kenan came with me. He's been there the entire time with this car. We met Dave at the bank downtown Hudson. We did the paperwork, transferred the title, paid for the car, and then drove it home. And when we got home, the first thing we did was give it a nice big wash and a detail. It wasn't bad at all. You just wanted to see what you had to work with. So I remember we took the license plate off, and it was dirty under there. We had the hood open, cleaned in the doors and the wheels. And the first thing that threw me for a loop was the gas cap. I could not figure out how to open the gas cap. Every Honda I had ever played with had a little switch somewhere over there next to the trunk lid switch, and you would push or pull that or press that button, and the gas cap would pop open. That was not the case here. We looked for an hour trying to find a switch before we then realized that, oh, the BMW doesn't have a switch. You just push the door and then the door opens, and that makes sense. Now, after the wash, we went to start the car to move it back over to its side of the garage, and not even a tick. The lights came on, and you turned the key, and we couldn't believe that the battery would die within the first hour of ownership, but It did. We kept thinking, well, maybe that we have to press the clutch. Does it have to be in neutral? Maybe it has to be in first. Does the door have to be shut? Like, we could not figure out why it wouldn't start. And this is long before I knew how to use a voltmeter and put that on the battery leads and probably discover that we only had 10 volts or something like that. But the first thing we had to do was replace the battery. As we start to talk about replacement parts, things get crazy. I have every single record of this car dating back to the original window sticker and the 1,200 mile service at a BMW dealer in Ohio back in April or May of the year 2000. Everything has been kept. I've put everything in plastic sleeves in these binders, labeled chronologically, in a 3-volume set. I'm not going to go through that and show you much more than that, just because there's definitely sensitive personal information on that paperwork. But everything's there, and it only looks this crazy because everything is put in a plastic sleeve. All of these records would fit in one binder, barely, without the plastic sleeves. So in my first year of ownership, I really didn't drive this car very much at all. I was learning how to drive. I was learning how to drive manual, and I didn't get it until July. So in those 6 months, it probably only saw maybe 1,000 or 2,000 miles. Having said that, when it came time for the first oil change, I very, very quickly learned that I was not going to be able to afford to upkeep this car. An oil change at the dealership was somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 or $500, and that's a basic annual, sometimes biannual service. So I was a tech guy at the time. I had an old YouTube channel where I did technology-based videos, and people had found me there. And ironically, that's how I met my friend Luke with the Avis 2000. He's got some great videos on E39 Source. He actually found the old technology channel, and then we had the shared common interest of cars, which was really cool. And I don't realize quite how much commonality there is between the car community and the tech world as well. So I was nerdy with technology and figured out, well, I'm going to get nerdy with cars then. We'll figure it out. As I say today, it's all bolts. I was fortunate enough that my previous owners had taken quite good care of the car. I did not find and have never found any aftermarket components installed on this car. Everything was original BMW. Everything was documented. Everything was clean and neat and how it should be. Having said that, this being a 2000 E39, it was completely stock, all pre-facelift, all original. For those of you who may not know this car as well, this is a February 2000 model year E39 M5 finished in Silverstone metallic with a Silverstone extended leather interior with factory PDC, ski bag, and split fold seats. M-Audio was not available. Front PDC was not available as part of the PDC package yet, and it does not have the rear sunshades or the factory telephone. In fact, the car didn't even come with HomeLink originally. I think that was either an option in 2000 or not yet available on the E39, although it was pre-wired. So as I discovered that I was going to have to learn how to do service on this car, from something as easy as a brake service to, at the time, I thought, as complicated as changing the brake pads and rotors, which I can now do in my sleep. But at the time, that was a big deal for me. So I was fairly resourceful. I would go to Google and type in 2000 M5 brake change DIY and find a couple of things out on M5 board. And I have to give a good hats off and appreciation, a show of respect to the original pioneers, the guys out on M5 board that bought these cars new, DIY'd them, put the pictures, put the forum threads and posts out there, and the DIYs. It was all a beautiful foundation to start on. Having said that, I quickly learned that M5 board was a really, really, really good resource. At the same time, it was a really, really, really frustrating resource. Now, M5 board has been completely redesigned since these early days back in 2010, but I found that if I were looking for the answer to a question, I could usually find it, but I might have to go through 30 forum pages and take an hour or two to read all these posts from people, most of them totally unrelated to the question at hand. And the forums were just, they were frustrating. You could find what you wanted, but it took forever. Now, I mentioned I did technology. I did a YouTube channel. We did reviews. We did little DIYs, started with the PC and then migrated to the Mac in early 2010 to never look back. And I thought, what if somebody did like car videos instead of showing how to put an SSD in a MacBook Pro? What if we just did a video on how to change your oil? And I go to YouTube and I search for that. And of course, there's already some out there, but none on the E39. So my goal was to create the content that I wanted to see, was to create the content that didn't exist yet. And I figured, well, if I want it, if I want to see it, then chances are other people might too. So youtube.com/E39Source was founded in September of 2011. So we've been around for 9 years now. And it started with easy stuff, how to take the shifter off. You know, I was scared of everything at the time. This was a $70-something thousand car when it was new. I got it for 12. I didn't want to break it. Parts were expensive even back then, though not nearly as much as today. So you guys have seen the old videos on this channel. They weren't very good. They weren't very processed or edited, and they're still not. I don't waste time on that. I'm just holding a camera here in the shop, walking around the car in circles talking about it, and I think that conveys my point just fine. After I got some of the basics done with the car, you know, when I got it, the check engine light came on day 2, the battery had died, it needed cabin filters. I kind of thought, well, the guy took really good care of it, but then saw the end coming, as unfortunately a lot of people do. They kind of just write out a couple months of not worrying about maintenance and then sell it, and it's someone else's problem. Now, they weren't big problems, of course, secondary error, we had a misfire, we needed spark plugs, stuff like that. And these were services I had done at my local BMW dealer, and wow, they were expensive. So this just hammered home the fact that I needed to figure this out. So with the car up and running, no check engine lights, all of that working very well, I kind of came up with a vision for the car. I started to do more research and look at the really nice examples online and the different colors and learn about the options and what changed based on markets and what changed on production months. And my goal for the car has always been a clean OEM plus type of look. Of course, everybody wants the 03, everybody facelifts the 2000s, and does any part of me regret it? No, absolutely not, because I don't like the 2000 running equipment. In retrospect, I should have waited and purchased a 2001 Plus car when I could afford it, but this just fell into my lap. It was at the right time, at the right price, in the right place. So I have no regrets with that. Obviously, as you can see today, the car presents to be very stock. Minus, you know, a couple little things that you enthusiasts will notice, Euro headlights, stuff like that. But this is a 2000 car, and it's been completely and fully facelifted to the 2003, in some cases 2003 Plus spec, from about 99% of things. There are things, there's fasteners that change, there's the headliner changed for C-pillar airbags. I haven't done things like that. But the vast majority of the functional upgrades here have been completed, which we'll be looking at throughout the video. The first 8 years I owned the car in Ohio, it was daily driven for the first 4 years or so. And if you know anything about Ohio, those are harsh conditions for a lot of the year. I was doing about 8,000 to 12,000 miles a year, half of those in the winter, driving it to and from school, both high school and then later in college. And the rust started to creep in. There was none when I got the car. I tried to keep it as clean as I could throughout the winter, but the salt and constant moisture just was not kind to the common areas. We had some bubbles back here that have since been repaired. All 4 rocker panel jack points have been repaired. The bottom of the driver's door got a little bit of rust on it. This corner had some rust. We had some bubbles right below the roundel here. The gas cap rust got ever so slightly worse. We'll take a look at that later. This corner as well. Up here we had a bubble. Inside the door jamb, right in that corner, was a bubble. Nothing major. Every year I would spend about $1,000 or $2,000 and have the car down for 2 weeks having rust repaired. And that got really old. And then, of course, you guys remember the E46 330xi. So I bought a 2002 330xi 5-speed, really, really nice car. Topaz, sand beige, M-Tech 2 sport equipment car. And I had that for 4 years. I put about 30,000 miles on that, and at that point, the M5 became a luxury. It became a nice day car. It was a garage queen. I am not as happy to say that in some years there it only saw 2,000 to 4,000 miles. It was driven quite sparingly. But of course, I had gone totally overboard in 2013, 14, and then 15 and 16 with just dumping money and resources and time into this car, trying to make it as perfect as possible. You guys may remember a video years ago I had what looked like a grand piano delivered to the house in Ohio. It was a huge box from ECS Tuning. That was one of the craziest days, one of the craziest months that I've ever had. It was so much fun. I got 4 new genuine BMW wheels for this car, 2 rears and 2 fronts. We did the bumpers, all the impact trim around the side of the car. I mean, I can't list everything I've replaced on this car. This video would be 3 hours instead of 1 or 2 or whatever this is. It was just insane. I went around the car, and anything that didn't look or present or function in new condition, I replaced. And I thought these parts were expensive back then. Some of them are no longer available. Some of them are many, many times the price now, if still available. So I'm actually really glad I did it then. You know, I could not afford to do a lot of that stuff now, and I wouldn't be able to do a lot of those things now because things like the rear wheels are no longer available. You cannot get new rear style 65 wheels. This is one of the last batches from, I think these went on in about 2014 or 2015. And I'm proud to say they're still in excellent condition. Speaking in broad general terms though, you know, I've facelifted the taillights. These are the Hella European retrofit kit lights, so they do run the ballasts, replace the rear badging. The trunk lid vertical part has been repainted, refinished in its entirety. We'll talk about mechanicals and upgrades later. Did the wheels, all the door trim, the mirrors have both been replaced. The mirror glass on the passenger side has been replaced since that was bubbling. Kidney grills have been replaced, both bumpers, all the trim, headlights, fog lights, Hella Euro LCI headlights, and then the facelift straight glass fog lights, not the corrugated 2000s. And then inside it has the facelifted steering wheel. It has all fresh Titan aluminum trim. Every piece of that was replaced back in maybe 2015 or 16, and that's something that I think it is still available. The whole kit's just over $3,000 now. I paid less than a quarter of that. All of these door sills have been replaced, and these door sill strips, the floor mats, the seat trims. There's a European dash in here. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I've replaced these door handles with the Titan ones. M audio subs are in the trunk. Not much in the back. There's not a lot to do in the back of these cars. The gas cap I did, the little door part. We've got the M5 trunk mat and the cargo net back here. Mark IV BM53 16x9 blue bus. The M audio subs are up there. The little bags, one has oil, another has detail spray and a towel in it. I do keep a set of jumper cables back here, more so for me, but if anybody else needs them, I can help with that as well. And then I think over here I did forget the Sirius as well, so it's got the factory Sirius in there. Fun fact, the little Sirius bracket here, that was the last one available worldwide, is here in this car. So let's talk about some of the retrofits. You guys have seen all the DIYs throughout the years. Some of them are straight, you know, American facelift retrofits. Some of them are European, and then some of them are just completely aftermarket. So we already mentioned the headlights and the fog lights and the tail lights. We'll kind of start back here in the trunk, I suppose. The M Audio came out in 2001. I did retrofit the 210-inch subwoofers, but not the rest of the speakers. They're still the original DSP speakers, since the whole wiring harness would have to change. But the M Audio speakers are there. That was a factory upgrade. Then this is as well. This is an O2 Plus thing. In fact, it's one of the more recent ones I've done, the little emergency escape handle for the trunk. An aftermarket retrofit would be the ECS LED interior light kit, which is controversial. I tend to like it with the Silverstone interior. So it does all the interior lights, including the glove box and the door puddle lights, the trunk lights, upper and lower, C-pillar lights, map light, center dome light, everything in there's a nice bright white light, which I do tend to like. This floor mat, which I just mentioned, is not the genuine BMW. That hasn't been available in years. This is from Shadi Hassan of the E39 M5 Owners Group on Facebook. I don't believe he has any more stock left, but this is a really, really nice addition for the trunk. Then we already mentioned the navigation equipment. This computer was actually manufactured in 2012. It's one of the last Mark IV computers made. And BMW used these up through the 2010 E83 X3, so that's why they were still manufacturing them in 2012. So nice fresh computer. All the technology in here is just updated as far as it possibly can be without going to iDrive or NBT or anything too crazy. The driver's side, the steering wheel facelift is pretty obvious for the O1 Plus, as well as the shift knob. That is the O1 Plus black leather illuminated shift knob, as well as the e-brake handle. In 2000, this car would have come with the Titan line shift knob and e-brake handle, which all looked like hell within a couple hundred miles. They just peeled apart. It was a bad design. So we have these parts. Then we have the LCM 3B. It's light control module with automatic headlights. They're off right now, but that would be automatic mode. I did that one back a couple of months ago. And that also required changing the rain sensor in the windshield to a rain light sensor. We have a hardwire of the Valentine 1 Generation 2 detector. I've been an early adopter of that product and love it now that it's working, and had to go back for some repairs early on. But the V1 G2 is up there and programmed or hardwired into the car. And then you can see the HomeLink module there. That's one of the first retrofits I did actually, and the new panel there with a microphone installed for the blue bus. And then the cylindrical looking thing on the right side of the windshield is the Dark View 650 dash cam. So there's one in the front that constantly records out the front of the car, and then in the rear there's a 720p camera up there in the center. So I have full running video whenever this car is running. This is an aftermarket thing, although it looks pretty stock. Those are the Bimian pedals. Bimian is no longer in business, or no longer has an online presence. I haven't figured out which is a real shame, because those are the only OEM-looking pedals that fit in the E39 M5. The M5 has a longer throttle pedal compared to the standard 5 Series, so the BMW pedals that you buy won't fit. And I hate when people bolt them on anyways, because they're the wrong pedal. So you got to find the M5 ones. Then the European dashboard, we've talked about that in the past, but it's a lot slimmer. It's several inches slimmer up here. You don't sacrifice any glove box space. In fact, you gain a little storage cubby in there, which is super nice to stick your wallet. You can still access the OBD2 port, no problem, complete with the Euro steering column trim and the Euro pedal box sealing, as I always call it. So it's a mostly stock looking interior. You know, it isn't completely stock with the Euro dash and the technically aftermarket pedals. We've also done the retrofit of the facelift HVAC panel, so that says Max AC instead of Rest. And then we've retrofit front PDC, so you can see I added the panel here with the PDC button. The 2000 cars option S508 PDC only included the 4 rear ultrasonic sensors, so I've retrofit the front sensors here using all genuine BMW components, and it works just like an 01 Plus car would with front sensors. Common question I get is, how can you tell it's still a 2000? What are the things that give it away? If you're really nerdy, you would know that Silverstone was a color that was only offered in the year 2000 and 2001. In September 2001, for the 2002 model year, BMW replaced Silverstone Metallic with Blue Water Metallic, which ironically is a bit more silver, less blue, whereas Silverstone is more blue, less silver. And if I'm honest, my preferred choice between those colors. Otherwise, obviously, looking at the VIN tag here in the B-pillar, or the VIN on the windshield, will show that it is indeed a February 2000 produced car. That's Bravo Zulu Niner 5540, for anybody who cares. Otherwise, one thing that gives it away as an earlier car would be the rear PDC sensors, which are still original. Notice they have a flat top and bottom to the sensor. Those were the, I believe, 2000 and 2001 sensors. In 2002, we'll take a look at Kenan's car here, being an 02. The sensor's completely round. Yeah, that is nitpicking at its finest, but a way you can tell it's an earlier car. Another thing that I've covered up is if you look at the sunroof switch here, it kind of shows, we'll try to get focused on this, it shows the sunroof cracked from the perspective of the driver's side of the car. The early cars, this was inverted. It showed the sunroof cracked from the passenger point of view of the car. Yeah, that's a real thing. As we still talk about cosmetics, let me apologize for just being all over the place. It's been a long 10 years and an expensive 10 years, and it's going to be impossible to put all this in order. But I'm trying to focus on the cosmetic things right now before we get into aftermarket or performance or mechanical work that I've done to the car, and there's no limit of that. Believe you me. But anyways, I've replaced, actually facelifted all of these door seals. Yes, there's a facelift for the door seals. They added a kind of a enhanced or a strengthened part. When this door is closed and that seal sits flat, it would put stress on these outer corners. So there's a bit of a texture there compared to the smooth outside of it. So these things, this was actually done about a week before I got the car. I'm guessing this was all torn up like most of these E39s get. So this has been on there for 10 years and it's not torn open yet. It does show a little bit of wear down here, but eventually that's probably something I'll get to be replacing again. So I've done all 4 of those to the facelift ones. I mentioned the sills and the trim, and I've done all this black plastic trim on the seat and the ones in the back too. Just any of those little components that, you know, I would do a job and take something out or take it apart, and if the parts were cheap and affordable and available, I just order them too. Replace all the hardware. I replaced the hood latch and the little dead pedal and stuff, like all this stuff in here that at the time was so affordable to do. So I just try to keep this car as fresh as possible, including all the window switches. I've done this panel as well. I actually damaged it when taking it out, so now I've got to fresh one, nice and matte black. Of course, the mirrors do fold, seeing that they've been replaced, and that's when I was able to get these mirrors for, I think, about 80 bucks a piece with the actuator. The glass has always been expensive. This glass is actually original. The other glass was about $350 a couple years ago. I painted the mirrors, put new hardware, new gaskets in there, new trim, and I'm really glad I did that, because now these mirrors are something like $1,200 a piece before paint. Back here, I mean, I've done very little in the back seat, as I mentioned before, but I did do all the door handles, all the Titan trim, all the window switches, original ashtray. They've never been used. This car's never been smoked in. All the leather in this car was actually replaced in 2003. I have the service records for it. Right before the warranty expired, it just said, customer states leather not black enough. So they replaced every stitch of leather in this car in 2003. How he got that done, I don't know. What not black enough means, I don't know. But I'm fortunate fortunate that the interior is 3 years newer than the car. It's held up a little bit better, I guess. Back seats are always in nice shape. I have done all of the plastics back here, so these speaker grills, the little child safety things, and this trim, the vents in the back, all of that stuff's been replaced. And then I'm fortunate that the previous owner had window tint installed in 2003 or 2005. I want to say 2003, right after he bought the car from the original owner. This is not the original tint. I've had it retinted, but since the windows have been tinted for the vast majority of this car's life, even in Ohio, it's really saved the interior, namely the Alcantara rear deck, the back of the headrests, stuff like that. It's just saved that from getting baked and faded and bleached out by the UV rays of the sun. So when I got to California here, within a couple months of moving here, I had that old Lumar film removed. It was a non-ceramic early film, and then I had the car retinted in Lumar Formula One Pinnacle or Stratos. I don't recall which one it was. It's whatever the better one was. I just went with the best tint. It's a California car. It spends a lot of time outside, and this is a 35% window tint all the way around. All the side windows and the rear window. I didn't do the sunroof because I keep the slider closed, and I didn't do the windshield yet. That's something that this car will be getting in the future, will be a fresh windshield. This one's from 2011. It's very, very, very pitted. The biggest chip, I don't even know that we'll see it on camera. Yeah, we can. The biggest chip is there. It's not bad. There's no cracks in it, and this is clean. That's not dust. Those are all just little pocks from the highway. So eventually we'll get fresh glass in here, and at that point I will film the front windshield as well to keep heat out. In the meantime, since getting here to California, I picked up this BMW sunshade that I put in the car at all times when it's parked, just to keep the direct light off the seats and dashboard. Back to the trunk, years ago I replaced a lot of the cosmetics back here. So this piece of trim, I remember thinking it was expensive at $80. I think it's over $400 now. I replaced this, I replaced the handle, all the hardware. I did this opening guard as well. It's showing a little bit of wear now there, but it's still very usable. This thing was like $300, now it might be $600. So I've done all of that. I love when people look at this car and they go in and they go out of it and they're like, what do you have, like 20,000 miles on this? And I get to tell them it's over 200,000 miles now. And since everything has been not only cared for and replaced as it starts to show age, but now my philosophy of this is I'm super careful with it. You know, I use the car a lot. I put a bike in the back of this thing pretty much every other weekend, fold the seats down, go to Coronado, ride 30 miles. But that thing is wrapped in so many towels, it looks like a mummy more than a bike. So you can use a car, use it pretty well, but also take care of it. You just have to be careful. Well, we're back here. Let's take a peek in the toolkit. I got all the tools from the second owner when I got the car, but I have added a couple tools that didn't come with it. In fact, there's only one tool missing, and that would be the blue cloth that American cars didn't come with in the first place. But this is the correct European warning triangle. I have the wheel key in here, the screwdriver, the channel locks, the wheel hanger, spark plug tool, tow hook, 2 spanners, sunroof crank, 10mm socket. Everything is here minus the blue cloth. And if I ever find one of those, I'll buy it. I'll pay what it costs. I just can't find them. They haven't existed now in decades. In the trunk here, I've replaced the battery 2 or 3 times in my ownership. Only once due to complete failure. The other 2 were just, it was old. I was at the dealer, I saw a battery. It's like, okay, let's put a fresh battery in. It's been 6 years. Right now it's the black BMW one, which is supposed to be a lot better. I see I need to do some vacuuming down here. My apologies. There is the original what is it, BMW M Mobility System and the original goggles back there. If I had more hands, I would dig that out, but that is in there. It's never been used. All the styrofoam is still there. It's just all the original equipment that came with the car is still in place, which I really like. And then I added this cargo net several years ago. I never really liked the way it looked, but I'll tell you, I do really appreciate the functionality it adds. Being a 2000 model year, it did come with the rear cup holders, which of course were broken when I got the car, so these have been replaced in my ownership with genuine BMW parts in addition to the front ones. Every single feature and function of this car works as designed. There's nothing broken, there's no broken plastic, there's no, oh, don't press that button because it won't work, it'll make noise. No, everything works, everything's how it's supposed to be. I hate when stuff doesn't work. All of these are original and go up nice and quietly and smoothly into their position. I have replaced this little door here a couple times. When that breaks, this handle's been done at least once. This tray's been done once. The 16x9 bezel's been done. Unbelievably, those center vents are all original, in addition to the vent over here and vent over there, and the rear vent. In fact, all the vents in this car are still original somehow. The one that really shocks people that is still original are all the window regulators. I have not changed one window regulator on this car. I have no service history of any of the regulators ever failing or needing to be replaced in 214,000 miles now, which is impressive given the fact that early E39s are known for having crap window regulators. And no, it's not because they're not used. I use the windows in this car pretty much every day. Now in California, year-round, they all go down, they all go up, they're all quiet, they all work. Many years ago back in Ohio, the instrument cluster, the original one with black gauges, had all the pixels go out, so BMW North America Goodwilled a good portion of it, and I had my local dealer install, code and program the gray gauges. After that, shortly after that, I replaced the instrument cluster bezel, the fog light switch. We can see the rear fog light switch is that 3 o'clock position, or 2:30 position on that switch, which is kind of neat. Then I did replace the headlight switch bezel, headlight switch knob, dimmer potentiometer, TPMS button. Just all of those plastics have been refreshed during my ownership of this car, and everything in here for the most part feels pretty fresh and new. The center console tray here has wireless charging in it, so as I place my iPhone 11 Pro down in there, as I start driving, it charges my phone wirelessly and completely cleanly. That is a plug-and-play DIY I put up on E39 Source months ago, and it actually plugs into the phone cables in here, so you could remove it from this car and never know that it was there before. But I have replaced that trim as well. That little door pops up quietly and smoothly, which I appreciate. The sunroof is original. As far as I know, it's never been serviced, it's never been replaced. Now that I say that, it will probably fail soon, and I really don't look forward to having to replace that someday. It's very expensive and it's not fun labor. The headliner is all original in this car. I'm thankful that it came with the Alcantara. In 2000, Alcantara was a cost option. In 2001, due to supply chain issues, 2001, it became standard. So I do have it in here. I did replace one of the A-pillars. One of the clips broke and it was bowing in the middle. It's not perfect now, but it's absolutely better than it was. In full disclosure, the headliner does sag in the normal spots, and that's been a product of California, unfortunately. If you open those visors, it is not as tight up in this lip as I would like it to be. One day as that worsens, I will likely peel that down and re-glue it, or replace the whole headliner if that's even a feasible option. I don't really want to do that, but if I got to do the sunroof, we'll have to see. And then back here, I had this corner start to sag. That was the first place that started to let go, and thankfully it was real close to the edge, so I was able to peel that down, spray some spray adhesive in there, put it back together. There's no wrinkles. It was actually a really nice clean repair, so that's been done. Okay, we're going to pop the hood now, start to talk about some of the mechanicals that have been changed, upgraded, replaced on this car. As I mentioned, OEM Plus is the goal, so I'm not looking for bright red chassis braces or strut tower braces, stuff like that, super loud exhaust. I'm not into that. I just want a OEM Plus clean, mostly stock looking car, and that's what I've attempted to build here. So this engine is not the original engine to this car. As many of you may remember, in 2016, purely preventatively, at exactly 192,000 miles, I purchased a 2002 engine from good old Adam Adam Bajrak Clemster on M5 board. This engine is out of a 2002 carbon black M5. It had 122,732 miles on it. And then I took it to my mechanic back in Ohio, and initially we were just planning on refreshing the engine. Fresh valve cover gaskets, reseal the bottom of the pan, replace some sensors that are tricky to get to when the engine's in the car, and of course it turned into more than that, and before I knew it, we had completely rebuilt this engine, minus 7 of the piston rings. 1 was damaged upon removal, so cylinder, I think 6 has a fresh piston ring on it, but everything else has been done. Every rubber, every sensor, every bearing, every bushing, so at exactly 192. So we now have about 23,000 miles or so on this engine, and it's run absolutely beautifully. It doesn't burn any oil. It sounds great. It's a joy to drive. So that was the biggest thing, of course, done to this engine. Now the original engine at 192 did consume a little bit of oil, being an earlier 2000 car, but it made great power. It sounded really good. It leaked a little bit, but we took that engine out, and I ended up selling it to somebody who opened it up. He was going to just refresh the timing chain guides and connecting rod bearings, which were original at 192. And he asked me when I did them. He said, no, they're original at 192. He couldn't believe how clean they were. Everything in there was in good shape. So I could have gotten several more years on that original engine. But this is an 02, so it's got the updated Vanos diaphragm springs, the updated piston rings. It's a nice, quiet engine. I had Dr. Vanos machine the splines. It does not leak a drop of anything. The belly pan is spotless. You can eat off of that. Which I love. And then I've replaced some of the pretty things under here to make it look nice again. So we've got fresh beauty covers on there. The dipstick's been replaced. The expansion tank's been replaced. Fan shroud, gasket. This lid and reservoir, the bushings for that. The upper and lower air boxes. The snorkels, the firewall trim. That reservoir, ABS module's been rebuilt by ABS or by Module Masters. Of course, fresh filters everywhere. These are K&N filters in there. Always used Castrol 10W60. That's all the oil the old engine had, and for it to be in that good a shape at 192, I will never question that. I will always run Castrol 1060. And I'm seeing something right now that does give this car away as a 2000. If you want to leave a comment, let me know. That would be funny if somebody else is nerdy enough to know. But that filler neck for the washer fluid is the 2000 filler neck with an 01 plus lid on it. The lid should be that light color. In 2001, BMW changed this filler that goes down to the reservoir for the washer fluid to a black one. And I actually have a couple of them over on one of the shelves here at the shop. I could facelift that. I just think there's better ways to use my time than tearing the fender liner out to replace this. And honestly, this one is more stable. This one doesn't bend around very much. The black one always hangs down and lays at an angle. It runs into these brake lines. So this is kind of a better design, albeit not as pretty. If you're curious, service work on the original engine at 192, it came out of the car in 2008 because it had carbon buildup. Carbon buildup is extremely overrated on these cars. It turns the check engine light on. People think it's a problem. It doesn't affect anything. Just tune it out, code it out. I wrote an article on the website, E39source.com. If you'd like to read more of my thoughts on that, please visit the website. But the engine was removed at that point to have the carbon channels drilled out. At that time, they replaced the head gaskets, the valve cover gaskets. They resealed the engine, put it back in. That's why it ran so well for so long. It had a pretty big service done before. Clutch was replaced at 8,000 miles. It must have been a lemon. Then again at 108 in 2008 when the motor was taken out for that work. And then when I had this engine built and fitted to this car, it was a lot more than an engine rebuild I did. We ended up rebuilding the majority of the driveline, replacing the clutch again, drive shaft with a fresh U-joint. I mean, anything we took out to get the engine out, we pretty much replaced. We got new brake lines all over the entire car, new rear control arms. We had the subframe out. We did the subframe bushings, did the differential bushings. I mean, you name it, it's been done. The rear little dust covers in the back were rusty, so I replaced those. I've done rotors maybe 3 times in my ownership with 66,000 miles. I do run the Hawk HPS pads, although I won't be using those again. They used to be silent. They bite really hard and really nice, and they didn't used to make much dust. Now they squeak. They make a ton of dust, although they do still stop very well. And the past couple Hawk sets I've had have done this. They're not as good as they once were. So if you have a brake pad recommendation, I require them to stop the car very well. They're brakes. They have to stop the car well. I would prefer that they're quiet and really it's the dust that I'm looking for. I don't want dust. I'll take noise over dust. I could spend all day going around the car showing you what's been done and rebuilt, mostly preventatively. People get the wrong idea. I say, oh yeah, I've rebuilt the engine, I've replaced this, I put a low mileage differential in it. It's a stock 3.15 LSD, but it's from a 50,000 mile car instead of a 190,000 mile car, and people think, wow, what a lemon, it's been so unreliable. That couldn't be further from the truth. This car's never left me anywhere. It's never not started aside from when the battery died. It's never overheated. It's never done anything that most M5s do to their owners. I've never even been stranded by a bad fuel pump before, probably because I replace everything preventatively, so of course it doesn't happen. But I've done all of this because I want a bulletproof, reliable, fun to drive, beautiful, clean, sleek, stock looking car here in California. That was my goal for 8 years in Ohio, was to get this thing ready to daily drive here, and I'm so proud to say that it's done it. It's never skipped a beat. It's been driven about 16,000 miles in the past year and a half here in California, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. Okay, let's talk about some of the aftermarket or performance modifications that have been done to the car. So we'll start at the back. These are Eisenman Race 4x76mm mufflers. I had the sport versions for a short period of time. I don't even think those should exist. The Race isn't that much louder. It's the sound it should be. I ran that system with stock headers, stock cats, and a stock resonator for a year or two, and decided, as it was a secondary car at the time, I wanted a little bit more. So at that point, the Rogue Engineering Diablo resonated X-Pipe, I had that installed, and that gave me exactly what I want. I love the sound of this car. It doesn't drone, it's not too much. I can drive this car with grandma on the front seat around quietly and nobody looks at you, or in between buildings in a parking deck or under an overpass. You can let the thing rev to 7,000 RPM and it just screams. It's exotic. It sounds like a Ferrari. Otherwise, I still have stock headers. I don't plan to change that. I know the headers are the weak point. They were designed for the M60 V8 on the E39 740, something like that, back in the 80s. You can change them and easily unlock 40 to 60 horsepower. One, I don't think the car needs it, and two, I've never heard headers that I like the sound of. I just don't like the way they sound. They sound like an American muscle car, and while that's awesome in an American muscle car, I do not want it in my four-door BMW. And then I did replace the cats actually for their second time. They were done under warranty in about 2004, 2005. And then the same cats that ran from 05 until just a few weeks ago are here. They really show damage from the Ohio corrosive elements, and they were just starting to rattle. These casings got loose and they were rubbing together in the middle, so we pulled those off, and then I had a nice set of lower mileage cats off a California car that I put in place. I think we will get under the car shortly in this video, but I've done the Eibach rear sway bar, the Beast Power brackets. We have ECS stainless brake lines at all four wheels, plus the two short ones under the hood. That's imperative. You guys have to do those if you haven't yet. I have the E60 545i short shifter in the car with the UUC DSSR, which is a really nice addition. And then I do have UUC transmission mounts, which I don't love. I wouldn't recommend those. They transmit a little bit too much noise. But that's pretty much all that's aftermarket underneath the car, I think. And then under the hood, as I mentioned before, there's just K&N air filters, and everything else under here is original or genuine BMW. Then of course the pedals are aftermarket. We talked about the interior LED lights, and then I do have LED halo bulbs in, don't we all? The yellow ones just really look dated to me, and the nice approximately 6,000 Kelvin 10 watt LEDs I think really improve the look of the front of the car. And then matching the bright white halo bulbs and xenons, I've got the Ziza 6,000 Kelvin fog lights from fog light bulbs from ECS in there. I hear that they don't last very long, but they've been in there for 7 years. I use them all the time, and they work fine. And both front and rear turn signals, I'm running, I believe they're Philips Silverstar PY21W bulbs, which are a clear bulb, but they still illuminate orange, so you don't see the orange. I didn't like the whole orange thing. So with the Euro headlights here, we don't have any orange on the corners. You can't even see the orange in the signal bulbs because they're cleared out, but they still look completely stock as they're flashing. I'll turn them on in a moment. I've turned on the rear fog lights here. Those are the inners. Those are not a visual style statement. Those are to be used for utility only. Then we can get a nice look inside the taillights here. We don't see a big orange dot in there in the middle for the bulb. It's just a clean look that I really prefer over the orange ones. And I'll turn the hazards on now so we can get a look at that and see that they do indeed look completely stock and orange when flashing. Oh, and then here in the back I do have, they're from eBay, believe it or not. I think they're 3x8 array LED license plate lights. They don't throw any lights. It just modernizes the whole back of the car. It's a nice bright crisp white light as opposed to those dim yellow ones that they came with 20 years ago. Also, PSA, check your side lights. A lot of times the orange paint on these bulbs is flaking off, and those are flashing in a bright white color, and they look terrible. The bulbs are super cheap. Just get some on ECS tuning or from the dealer, replace those bulbs, and you'll restore a nice, crisp, full orange light as it's supposed to be. Then a small visual modification from the back. The rear diffuser is not missing. No, it's painted black. It's BMW jet black, paint code 668, I believe, which to me really thins out the rear of the car. It looks more aggressive. I really like the black diffuser on this. I think it's a must-have for light-colored cars. Kenan liked it, so his is also black. Software, that's something I hadn't mentioned. This car is tuned with the Shark injector. I did that years ago to code out the secondary airflow to low code. It's a stock 7,000 RPM redline. It is a 91 octane tune now. Here in California, we don't have 93. Back in Ohio, I ran the 93 tune, then detuned it for California. I didn't notice a difference. Euro throttle settings and no sport mode memory. I should have done that, but nice little tune. I definitely recommend it. Do you notice 30 horsepower? No. Car's fast either way. We'll get the car out in the sun in a little bit, but I did just last week find this little sticker on there from C-Quartz, which is kind of cool. So it shows that the car's been coated. And since I've had it coated, I've detailed it twice with my normal spray wax, my Friday routine. And what a difference it makes. Not only visually, I mean, the car was nice before. The paint was in pretty good shape, but it was hazy. There were places that you could hold your watch up to it and not read the time. It was just, you know, swirled. I haven't washed this car in 3 years or so, and people always look at me like I'm crazy when I say that because it's generally clean. Once a week, I spray wax the car. I use a waterless wash. It's called Zano Z6. I know you shouldn't do it. When the car is dusty, you're just grinding all of that into the paint, and it'll get bad again because I hate washing cars. It takes me forever. They run water all the time, and I just don't have the patience for it, so I'm not going to do it. So every Friday now, I spray the car down and very carefully with using several high plush towels, go through the whole thing and wipe it clean. And the car doesn't see rain, it doesn't see any other elements. It has not yet been dirty enough in the past couple years to warrant a wash. If it were really dirty, of course I would wash it. Stripping off all the old wax and then compounding the paint, it's more blue. It's less green, it's less yellow. The Zano always kind of added a tint of, the full Zano process I used to do of several coats of wax would add a slight tint of green or yellow. With that gone, it's just clear, optically clear, bright Silverstone. As I said, we'll get it in the sun, you can see it shine. And then the whole back of the car where they always spit carbon, even with a fresher engine, all of that really lightened up and just cleared up, and it's shiny and beautiful now. Also on the wheels, you may notice the facelift 2002 Plus center caps, and then when I replaced these wheels, I got new M badges, wheel studs, and wheel lock kit, as well as the BMW valve stems, and of course Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires now. Well, the key is on. We'll take a look inside. Of course, all the pixels work now. Current mileage 214,443. Nice bright instrument cluster, I think, since it was replaced in like 2011, 12, 13, something like that. Compared to a lot of the other ones I'm around all the time now, this is significantly brighter, which is a nice touch. Over here, we can see we've got a pretty full array of options here on the screen. The telephone is thanks to the blue bus, and then code will light up if I put the key back in position 1. The blue bus looks like this. You guys have seen the video on the channel. I will do a video on how to update it now that there's some software updates out. We can see it's connected with the green light up here. It gives us all the metadata, and a new feature, we can see the coolant temp digitally. And then of course, being a Mark IV, we can head over to navigation and see the map in perspective view. I'll show you the wireless charging. I always put my phone in backwards, but I just pop it down in there like that, and the phone immediately wakes up and charges. from the front seat here. We'll demonstrate some of the things up here. This is real hard to get out, but it does come out. It's never been used. Both cup holders work, and I use them about once a year for something very carefully, just to exercise them a little bit. That still works. I've never actually seen that motor fail before. Never tried the tape deck in this head unit, so I'm not sure if that works, but probably does. Then the glove box, I've got all the books, the user guide, the washing booklet, the mechanical booklet. That thing's totally full. The flashlight does work. I have the flashlight adapter too, it's just not in the car right now. That would turn that into another power port. I still keep the old school Peak R5 FCX3 in there, and then a adapter from the round under the hood pin to the OBD2. Just in case I'm out on the road and a check engine light or something comes on and I need to reset something. That has happened once since the engine rebuild, and it turned out to be a bad MAF. So I reset the light and then replaced the MAF when I got home, or a couple days after, and no problems since. The airbag recall has been done. That is a recalled Takata, which is good to know. Parking brake's been rebuilt, so it's super tight. 3 or 4 clicks will all but lock the wheels as the car is driving, hold it on any incline that I've been able to find. The E60 545i short shifter is real nice, very little play in it. Been super happy with that. And this is an original transmission at 214,000 miles, which is cool. Okay, a few more things here. We're going to show you the car outside in the sunlight. We'll do that in a minute. We're going to put it up on this lift. I'll show you some of the aftermarket things underneath. And the car is not completely rust-free. It escaped Ohio, but not without a few signs. Chassis underneath, some of the welds show some light bubbling. There's nothing too serious or structural. Nothing I'm even going to bother repairing, seeing that the car doesn't see any sort of moisture anymore. But we'll get a look under there. And then right now I'm going to talk about future plans. What's next for the car? So I just had it paint corrected and protected. I do plan on respraying this car someday, and this may be 5, this may be 10 years away. The paint is good, but it is not as nice as I would like it to be. There's definitely a bunch of chips up front in the hood now. The biggest one happened within 100 miles of having it repainted back in 2011, right on that corner there. It's filled with some paint, but you can still see it. The front bumper's been painted since it was replaced. The hood's been painted. This bottom of this door below the impact strip's been painted. Both rockers have been repainted. Both rear quarters from the body line down have been repainted. And I have to say that the paint match is about a 9.2 out of 10. You can see it's a hair darker than the rest of the car. Some of it's in lighting, but it is a little bit darker. And then the quality of the paint finish in terms of not being able to see a real seam, it's totally smooth. It's very, very, very good paint work. Rear bumper's been done, diffuser's been done, vertical part of the trunk lid, this quarter panel, this rocker panel, and I think that is about it. In both mirrors, all the pillars and roof are original. So I'd like to repaint it. It'll be the same color, probably do inside the door jambs, knowing me. This will be done years from now, which is why I was able to justify a coating for protection here. You know, when I do it, I want this car to be a secondary car, live in a garage all the time. It's just a couple years down the road still. To my knowledge, this rear windshield gasket is original, and how it's only just now, like today was the first time a piece of it flaked off as I wiped down the rear window. So that will need to be replaced. I have no patience for a flaking gasket. A little bit of texture in it over here too. And I've actually had the gasket on hand now for a couple of weeks. We're going to do Kennon's as well. So I have 2 outer gaskets and 2 bottom gaskets. We'll get those nice and fresh soon. I wish years ago I had replaced all of this shadow chrome trim. I didn't. It was expensive then. It's even more expensive now. I would love to have a fresh set of that. I have a couple imperfections in it, nothing crazy. Just some chips from use, a couple little rust bubbles here and there. Very minor, like that corner down there. I would love to replace that trim all the way around the car and this gasket in here and these little gaskets, and that's something that is not pressing at all. Maybe that's something that's done with a respray of the whole car, since likely that stuff will all have to come apart. And then I had mentioned the windshield. I'll put a new Pilkington, probably piece of glass in here with a new rain light sensor prism. We'll move the sensor over. Like to replace the wiper arms. The plastic is starting to fade a bit to gray, so maybe we'll consider that in the future if they're at all available or affordable. And then I will definitely do the cowling hardware, and a fresh OEM gasket around the perimeter of the windshield when the windshield's done. Likely later this calendar year here in 2020. I also noticed today in the front hood roundel, which is also original to the best of my knowledge, at about 4 o'clock there's just some discoloring in the black. It looks like something sticky got on there and then somebody tried to wipe it off and it scratched it. Super, super minor. If it starts to peel or bubble or anything, I'll replace it. Otherwise, I could probably live with that for now. I couldn't even get the camera to see it. And then lastly, with future plans here, sometime fairly soon I would like to have some interior reconditioning done in the way of leather work, particularly this door handle here. I used Swissvax leather cleaner on it years ago. It was way too strong and it really made it worse than it was before. It's showing its age a little bit there. It's clean, but the leather could use some I don't know, I'm not a leather specialist. It needs to be repaired. Same thing over here, the driver's seat. You guys have never seen this. It's the worst part on the car. This bolster here is not yet torn open, but it absolutely needs some work in the way of fresh leather panels or reconditioning or sealing, or I don't know. I'm not a leather specialist, but we'll get that taken care of. Now, also in the way of protection here, this car does have some clear film on it. I did not clear film the hood because it already has too many chips to warrant putting expensive film over. I will do that after it's painted. Like when this car is painted one day in years, I'll have the whole thing baked. We're going to clear wrap the entire thing. It'll be bomb-proof. More or less. But before I came here to California, I had the front bumper filmed with Expel Ultimate Plus, whatever the latest Expel was at the time. So that has film on it. The front headlights have film. The fog lights have film. Didn't do the fenders. They will get repainted and filmed as well. The mirrors have been filmed. Within 100 miles of being here, I got a nice big chip in the film, and I thought it went through to the paint. When they did the paint correction a few weeks ago, I had them peel the mirror film off and then refilm them, and I can't believe that it didn't actually go through the film. So this mirror now looks perfect again, and this film installation job is much better than before. There used to be a big seam right here. Now the seam's only over here, and you can barely see it. So the mirrors are filmed, and then one thing I definitely wanted to do before I got here was film these door handles, and I did all 4 of them. You can barely see it or feel it. It's a little bit shinier maybe than the paint, but I've seen way too many California cars where the paint starts to crack and fade. It's a really common thing, so I've got nice film over that to protect the handles. I even had them C-quartz in here. There's a little bit of rust. That's all from Ohio. I'm not going to bother fixing that until the car receives more body work. This is C-quartzed in there now, so hopefully that'll slow that down even more. And then there's no film in the back. I also found these stickers on top of the windshield here in both corners stating that the car is protected by C-quartz. Excuse the wind and being outside here, but I did want to show you the paint out here in the sun. It just lights up. We're right outside the shop here in Escondido, California, in North San Diego County. It's a beautiful day in August. About 3 hours after a fresh detail. So it's just nice and blue, and under the California sun and against the blue sky, it's never looked this good before. You know, after the 18-hour, 46,000 coats of Xano waxes, it looked good. It was very glossy. It was debatably smoother and shinier than this, but the clarity, the optical clarity and light reflection here is just awesome, and I couldn't be happier with the C-quartz product so far. You know, this is a good color for showing, or for hiding rather, swirls. But with the coating on it like this now, and after more importantly, after a compounding and paint correction, yeah, it's still scratched up. It's still a 20-year-old car, still chips in it. It's not perfect, but I really like how it looks now. I am on the verge of having a dead battery. I wonder why. So we'll try to be fairly quick here, but we'll get a look under the car. We can see that black diffuser again. Then we see the Eisenman race mufflers, my all-time favorite on this car. I do about once every 3 months kind of just wipe things down under here, inspect the suspension, look for any leaks or seeps, stuff like that. Just keep an idea of what's going on under the car. So we see the mufflers, and then we see the beautiful Rogue Engineering X-pipe. And you'll notice that all of the plastic trays and pans and panels that are supposed to be here are here. They've all been replaced with the exception of the skinny little runners that go down the side of the chassis. The fuel filter cover, the mirroring one, the Patrick Star, and then the engine belly pan have all been replaced at some point. They were all here originally, just cracked or dirty or washed out whole. I replaced things at nearly the first sign of wear. Chassis braces, center exhaust brace have been replaced. Exhaust bushings in the rear. There's the Eibach sway bar. We have the purple bushings back here for the diff, front and rear. The Beast Power brackets. The sway bar has a couple rust spots on it, which is funny because this has never been wet under here. This car has not been wet underneath in at least 6 years now, yet parts I've replaced within that time period still rust, I suppose, due to condensation. Cleaned up a lot of the places that you typically see grease sling, stuff like that. I've just kept that clean. Rear upper control arms have been done. In fact, the entire suspension on this car has been replaced with OE quality parts, with the exception of the rear integral links. Those are original, and the front springs are original. They're not rusty, they're not sagging, and they're not cracked, so I don't see a reason to replace them. There's Powerflex bushings in these H-arms, both front and rear of the H-arm. And then the diff bushings, factory subframe bushings, clean battery box, some rust on the welds like we talked about before, or I talked about before. There's the new cats, new to me cats. The transmission does seep between the gearbox and the bell housing, so next time that's out for clutch, I'll reseal that. It's not enough that it ever drips, it's just kind of oily under here, and I check the level about once a year. There's those UUC trans mounts that I don't love. I'll put factory ones back in there. Of course, I've done the whole drive line. I've done the CSB, the CV joint at the end of the drive shaft, the flex disc up here. We even had to do these heat shields here. The holes had washed out, so they were still available. So I just got new ones for both sides. Anytime I do this work, I replace hardware. I just think it's a better way to go about it. And then up in the front, clean underside of the bumper, which I'm proud of. You know, these cars look better lowered, maybe an inch, 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches, but they're not nearly as functional, especially here in California with the hills and the rougher roads. This I'll scrape on if I'm not careful. If I know it's coming, slow down just a hair, it's fine. Low cars scrape all the time, and these underbody panels are just expensive, and I would hate to go through that, so I leave it at a stock height. And the battery died on the other camera, so we're going to switch to an iPhone. I apologize for the different video and audio quality here. Done the front wheel bearings, done the rear wheel bearings, done the hubs, all the bushings, all the brackets, all the usual suspects. The only things calling my attention under here right now, as I mentioned, are the gearbox to bell housing seep, and then this tie rod has the slightest crack in this boot. So I have a set of fresh tie rods here at the shop. I'm just waiting for an opportunity to put them in. I'm debating replacing these big curved control arms again, just due to the fact it's been about 30,000 miles. That seems to be as long as they last. And there's the slightest crack in there. Don't have any of the wobble, no vibrations, no problems yet. But as I've said, I try to be proactive with that. So we'll probably get to that later this year at some point, then get a fresh alignment. I'm going to try the 0.5X on the iPhone, and yes, I'm laying on the shop floor under the car. So hopefully I live to tell about it. But that's the underside. I don't really think I've filmed very much of this car from this angle before for the channel. So there it is. I'll also call a quick note to those fuel lines here. I've replaced all the fuel lines in this car from the tank up to the engine, through the filter and the pressure regulator, the Venturi hose in the tank straps. Just all of this stuff was crusty after Ohio. And you know, the subframe's been out and reinforced. That front diff mount was reinforced with the Dynon plate. I want to have this car a really long time. So whenever I do work, I replace hardware, replace that too. Well, while you're in there, those are the most expensive terms that you'll hear, because you know they dig into the car, and well, we're in there. We could replace the fuel pump too. It's like, yeah, I don't have a record of it. Get it done. Hey, it looks like I didn't get an ending clip. So it's midweek now. It's Tuesday. I've driven the car a little bit, so you're going to see some bugs and stuff on here now. But I just wanted to get this video out here. 10 years, I can't believe it. It's totally flown by. 10 years ago, I didn't know how to turn a screwdriver or a wrench, and I'm not some master mechanic or anything now, but it's been a hell of a ride. As I mentioned at the top, the people I've met and the opportunities and the business venture and all this stuff has been really, really, really cool. So I look forward to your comments down below. Leave me some constructive criticism. I always welcome it. If you have any recommendations of future retrofittings, repairs, replacements, enhancements, anything like that, I'm always open to hear that. So I look forward to reading those comments. We'll talk in a future E39 source video. Take care.